Okay, so for this project, one of their deliverables and one of the things that you have to, or for this problem that you're solving, you have to present is your data. Okay, so when you look at this, this is some data that I collected from the pumpkin. And what I have done is I did test one and made my measurements, test two. And so each test I made my measurements and then I wrote them down. Now, one question I had in class a lot was how do I find the average? And so the way that you do that is you add all five of the tests together. So you can see that I put the plus signs and I added all five of the tests together. And then I divided the sum of all five of the tests by five. And so the reason why I did that is because to find the average, you divide by the number of tests that you had, basically. So there were five tests. I added all of them together and divided by five. And 40 centimeters was the average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that data and I'm going to create a graph. And so when I'm looking at this graph, this is called the x-axis. Okay, and this is the y-axis. Let's see if I can get this to stop auto-focusing. Okay, so on your x-axis, you have your independent variable, and the independent variable is the variable that is changing. And so what that looks like is what we're changing in this is basically each test. Okay, so I'm doing a new test each time. So we're going to say, here are our tests, and this is test 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and on your y-axis is your independent variable. I'm sorry, your dependent variable. What that is this data depends on this. So the number that I got from here, this number is dependent on my first test, what I did for my first test, right? So one of the main things that you need to decide is how you're going to organize your numbers on your y-axis, because I have up to 40 centimeters. So I could do, and you guys will do this on graph paper, so it'll be more precise, but I could do ones all the way to 40. Or I could do by fives, or I could do by tens or 20s or hundreds. It depends on how big my data is here. Okay, so I'm going to choose to do it by fives, but because I feel like it'll be enough spread out and equal, but not to where I'm having to squish all my numbers all the way to 40 here. And actually all the way to 50 because my largest number is 50. Okay, so I'm going to start, this is 0, and then I will have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. Okay, and then you have a couple of different options. You can do a bar graph or you can do a line graph. And so let's say my first one is 30. If I'm doing a bar graph, then I will go over to the 30 and I will make my bar over test 1. Okay, and then I will look at my next one and it's 35. So I'm going to come across and make my bar on 35. My next one, if you see, test 3 is 50. So I'll come over and make my bar on 50. Okay, and then test 4 is 45. So we're going to make my bar on 45. And then test 5 is 40. So I'll make my bar on 40. Okay, and so this is my graph of my data. You could also do a line graph, and the way you would do a line graph is instead of doing the bars, you would just make dots at each one of those points, and then you would connect your dots. But you wouldn't have these bars here. So you can do a line graph or you can do a bar graph. Now, you're going to want to put your data, you're going to have two sets of data on one graph. So let's say I build my second prototype and I do my next step, and I say that these are my numbers. Okay, those are my numbers. Now, and you guys can do a line graph. You could do line graphs. You'd have to use different colors. So I'm going to have a key to tell me, or you can do a bar graph. So I'm going to do a bar graph, and my key is going to be this. The open ones are prototype 1, and then any bars that are colored are going to be prototype 2. Okay, so when I look at my next data, I can say my test 1, is 50 centimeters. So I will go to 50 centimeters. And I'm going to put it over here. And then I'm going to color this in. Okay. And I would do this, you will do a better job of that. But I'm trying to just walk you through the process so you understand how to do it. And then I would continue to put my data points on there for each one, and then I would color it in. So 50 and then 55. Whoops. Okay, put it here, and I would color this in because that was my second one. And so just by looking at this, and I would finish it. Now you want your bar graph to be straight and you want it to be nice. Now you notice that I have 70 here and this only goes to 60. So when you make your graph, you want to make sure that it goes all the way to your highest point. Okay. But just by a quick glance, I can tell that my prototype 2 went further than my prototype 1 for most cases. And then when you average it, you'll see that it has a higher average. So you would add all of these together and then divide by 5 and get your average. Okay, and so this is the data that you will present to prove whether your prototype was more successful or not. So once you get your data, then you are going to go ahead and take that data, make sure you have the correct average, and you are going to create a graph. Now you can use graph paper to make it neater. I suggest you use graph paper, not just the bottom of this this sheet for your graph.